Hi, welcome back to the Agile Commute podcast, where we will laugh and explore fresh insights and practical advice to re-energize and inspire your leadership, business, and Agile journey. We are your co-hosts, John Burns and Casey Sharp, and thanks for joining us on the ride today. In this episode, we will continue our discussion around Google design sprints. Let's jump right back into it. Okay, so you sort of answered one of my questions of can you do this in fewer days? I'm going to restate what I think I heard.
Mm-hmm.
You probably should still do the full 5 days, even if you break it up to not be consecutive. But if you can't do the full 5 days, you could probably still do something worthwhile.
So let's just say, for instance, we had a strategy, and this is how we were going to implement the strategy. It was a large phase, and our prototype was, these are the large capabilities we plan on implementing. There was no mock-up. It was just screenshots from other things that we pieced together, and there was no actual system that was on the screen. You could have a design sprint that's a level below this that is focused on one of the features, and you could do that in a couple days. You don't have to do the story. You don't have to build that out. It's already built out. If anything, you can enhance it at a lower level for a workflow, but that will probably come out in the actual Figma mockup or wireframe. So if it's focused just on the wireframe, you could do 2 to 3 days.
Okay, I gotta stew on that one, because that brings me back to my original complaint of isn't this just sort of what we're supposed to be doing anyway?
I mean, I don't disagree.
I mean, because really, if you did all of that work and then you're we need to have a design sprint on this one feature, it's that's just refinement. I don't understand. That's you doing requirement analysis and refinement on a thing before you develop it.
Yes.
When we write epics or features or capabilities or whatever you want to call them in whatever organization you have, we combine the whole thing. So design and development. So that includes if we have to reach out to users, if we have to validate assumptions, if we need to do some prototyping, that whole thing is all included in the capacity of delivering that thing. That's why I'm not totally sold. But okay, that's fine.
I'm going to ask a tough question here. How long does it take you to do that?
I don't know how to answer that question. What do you mean? I don't know what that means.
Let's say you got a new epic.
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take to get from the idea of the new epic to ready for development?
Oh, that so depends. There's so many factors that go into that. Because
medium-sized epic.
Well, I was going to say it depends on who the user group is, who requested it, how complicated is it, how many other teams are involved in it. So it could either be extremely fast or extremely long. It just depends on what the thing is. And I would say if it's a medium, we would have to look at it again and take some of these other things into consideration, because again, our mediums don't equate to a time frame per se.
Well, I say medium because that's the typical size of a large thing like an epic.
Yeah, I mean, we just did one that was a small, and outside of sequencing or dependencies or other things getting in the way, probably the whole thing took maybe from the beginning. Well, actually, hold up. Do
duration.
you include
not time, duration?
Oh,
how long duration?
That's impossible. That's irrelevant. It truly is with my team. It absolutely is, because we have people out
it's not
reprioritizing a million things all the time. So that
it's not irrelevant.
It absolutely is irrelevant.
The reason why I say I asked about the duration is because for a design sprint to work, you have all the right people in the room, and you have them in the room for a compressed 1 week
our feature
maximum.
Delivery includes development, testing, and into production. Your design sprint doesn't include that.
Okay. I said, how long does it take from epic ideation, from the idea until ready for delivery? And when I say delivery, ready to be worked.
Okay, let me restate what I just said. When we create an epic feature capability, it includes doing all of the design work and the development work and deployment to production.
Oh.
Because this capability isn't done until all of those things are done. And so when you ask duration, right, we might be doing some of the design work in advance, and maybe the development work doesn't start for a few sprints or doesn't start till the next quarter or, whatever, just based on priorities, right? So like,
yeah, I meant cycle time, duration of a cycle time up until ready for start
yeah,
to
I mean,
code.
it depends, right? It depends on how big the capability is, how much of design changes are needed, who the user groups
Yeah.
are. We also have we have so many user groups with competing opinions. And so
Yeah.
deconflicting those and making sure that people agree. And then we have our own, like similar to you, right? Like we have design iterations. We go back and validate some of those things with people. And sometimes it can be very quick and sometimes it can be very lengthy. And it just depends on who the user group is.
Yeah.
And I would argue
Yeah.
that even this that you guys are doing with the design sprints could be not as effective if you had certain user groups that were so unavailable. Because then you wouldn't have people here. So you'd do the whole design sprint
Right.
and then you still wouldn't really
Yeah.
get what you needed out of it.
That's going to be the conversation between the facilitator and in this case, in the beginning, the product manager. The facilitator would likely say, look, we shouldn't start until we have all the right people in the room. And once we do have all the right people in the room, maximum 1 week. That's it, maximum.
Yeah, I just feel like
Because
in a lot of places that just wouldn't fly and then you'd just be forced to do it anyway.
oh sure, yeah, sure. That's when you would split it up and stuff. But because the purpose is not on efficiently using the number of hours that you're using with the number of people. The purpose of it is end to end realization and verification of true value. So 1 week is actually pretty good.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. I'm just still annoyed that you're asking me about duration.
My intention was from the idea up until ready for it to go into a sprint.
Yeah.
Because that's the endpoint to this. The endpoint of this is not production.
Right. And the point I was trying to make is that I don't understand the point of this as its own thing rather than it being baked into the feature itself. Let's say you create a feature that's like, again, I'm just picking on Amazon because it's just easy and everybody knows what it is. It's like, we need to build a thing in your cart that does like a suggestion, like, hey, maybe you also want to buy this thing. Like, let's say that's
Sure.
the feature, right? Like on our team and on other teams I've been on, there's the requirement. And we estimate it to include doing all of the design sprint work and the development work.
Okay.
Because the value of that thing and feature closing is when it's delivered in the hands of an actual person in production. If you just do the design sprint, there's no value added to anyone, depending on how you look at value, which we're definitely not getting into that. There is no use for any of the work that you've done from the design sprint until you've developed and delivered it. I mean, do you agree with that or?
You said you didn't want to get into the value that's achieved.
Well, you could just say
it's a
yes or
different
no.
value.
We could move on.
No. I think it achieves its purpose. 100% achieves its purpose. Its purpose is learning. Its purpose is not to deliver a product.
That's not what I'm saying. If you have a feature, or let's say you have a requirement to build something that recommends stuff for people when you're in an Amazon cart getting ready to check out.
Yeah.
That's the requirement. Is the requirement met after you've done this design sprint?
No.
Exactly. That's all I'm saying.
No. The requirement is clarified. That's it.
The way to finish that requirement is to take the stuff from the design sprint and actually develop and deliver it. So when we have this requirement and we're trying to plan capacity and how do we deliver this requirement, we're baking in all of this design sprint stuff into that. Because if we go to our stakeholders and say, oh, we did the design sprint, the requirement's done, they'd be like, are you out of your mind? Of course it's not. And we'd be like, yeah, duh, of course it's not, because we didn't deliver it.
Yeah.
Which, again, I understand that, like, you might do this design sprint and you might find out that you don't need that at all. And it's a waste of time and, like, let's not do that. Cool. Let's get rid of the requirement. That's awesome. But I'm just saying that when we look at requirements and we're refining our backlog and we're creating these plans to accomplish them, we're baking this stuff in already.
Right. Okay. So that That's the broader implication, which is how do you incorporate this or something like this in your life cycle? Um, After the design sprint, I'm going to be looking at what level this should be applied at or recommended to be applied at, and where, and how many different levels, and what does it look like at each level. Because you're right, when applied at a particular level, you have to incorporate this activity into the effort involved to get it to done. I agree. Because the customer's ultimately going to want to know, how long is it going to take to do this? Like, I want to incorporate generative AI across our entire product suite. How long is it going to take to get there? Well, you're going to have to incorporate that, and included in the estimation are design sprints. So,
Right.
yes, you'll have to incorporate this, and it's risky. I'll say this: it's very risky if you're planning for a design sprint because you're banking on people's availability. Like the right people have to be available at the right time. And that's pretty risky because everyone's busy. Kind of what we described, how we got into the situation we're in, because everybody's busy, everything's a collateral, or they're doing 5 million things and they have to carve out a full week or a couple days of their time just to do a design sprint. It's tough.
So I have like a bunch more questions, but something you said
Mhm.
made me think of one of the sessions I went to at the conference, which was about estimating, which I don't want to be too critical. I went into this session expecting one thing and I got another thing, which
Mhm.
whatever that's worth.
You love that.
I cannot tell you how much that is the bane of my existence. I get so angry. You set an expectation and now you're doing some other thing. Don't bring me on this roller coaster I didn't ask to be on.
Yes, I agree. When you're telling somebody when something's going to get done, you have to incorporate all the things you intend to do. And
Okay,
if
wait.
design sprint is part of it,
I didn't even say what the session was about.
okay,
The
go for it.
session was about estimation. I was just complaining that their session was not what they said it was going to be.
No,
But the session was about how to estimate better across teams, which they like kind of touched on. But I felt like the biggest thing that they harped on was the longest pole in the tent when people are like, how long will this take or how long will it take to get done? Is they were like, that's the wrong question to ask. The question to ask is, when will it start? When will the development start?
mm,
Which that's like interesting, and maybe that's for another time. I'm not sure I fully am into that, but I got what they were sort of saying, where it's like there's a
yeah,
lot of things that need to happen and people need to make decisions and stuff has to get prioritized. So the development part is often not the hardest part, is more or less what they were trying to say. Yeah, that was at least my takeaway.
oh, I agree with that. We've figured that out, so I agree with that. Yeah,
Which again, like I think a lot of the detail and nuance of what they were saying, I wasn't fully bought in on. But I do agree that we struggle with that just as far as getting people to make decisions, people saying they want to do stuff, and then like priorities changing or us having to do a lot of requirement analysis that people didn't think needed to get done because they're like, that's so easy. Why can't we just do
yeah,
it? And it's like, well, hold on. Hold phone. And so it takes such a long time before you can even like put hands on keyboard. And that's not to say that that's a bad thing. I agreed with them that a lot of times people are just like, well, how long does it take? And they don't really understand that there's all this stuff that should really be happening before you even start developing.
yeah. So, on that point, at the end of each day of the design sprint, man, they were long. They weren't really that long hours wise in the day, but man, they just took a lot of cognitive energy. So it was tough to do this, but I offered a 30-minute design sprint after dark kind of summary, daily summary for anyone that wanted to call into the virtual call to have me go through what happened during the day and where they ended up and what we're planning on doing the next day. So on one of these days, and this is your point earlier, on one of these design sprint after dark meetings, before I started the meeting, there was a group of three engineers because we were doing them in our space. Through group of three engineers came into the conference room. They said, "Hey, are you going to do your daily summary?" I'm like, "Yeah, you're welcome to sit down at the table. I'm going to do it right here." And then I just went through what we did and then what we were going to look forward to for the next day. And then I ended the call and I said, "Hey, how was that? So, what do you guys think?" And the facilitator was there too, and we were getting into a conversation. They basically said, "Yeah, we're working on an MVI right now, And it would be so great if we did this before this MBI started, because we're in the process of doing it and we're figuring out what they meant. And they're like in their
Mhm.
second sprint or something. And I said, how
Oh,
big
no,
is your
no,
MBI?
no.
They said, well, medium. And I know from looking at our data and stuff, that's roughly 5 sprints. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you you're in the middle of a 5 sprint MVI, and it came to you as a one liner.
Yo,
Like the, oh my
dude, we
gosh, this is
literally, I
just
don't know, maybe my organization's not that bad, but I legit would be like, I'm throwing this back in your face. How dare you ask us to do this ridiculous requirement that has no information? I
yeah.
am
I
I
mean,
am not about that. You
what
give me a
what
one-line
do we do
thing,
with
that
this?
sucker's not going into a quarter. That sucker's not going
Yeah,
into a sprint. You can kiss that
yeah, yeah.
idea goodbye, which I know a lot of places don't do that. It drives me insane. I get pings from people during the day where they're like, can you tell me when this thing's going to be done? Like, what quarter is this going to be done? I'm like, there's no information in here. How am I supposed to give you an answer about that? Why don't you go figure out what you're asking me and then come back? Oh my God, I'm getting so fired up. These people drive me crazy. Oh my God. And like today, that's happened
Yeah.
today. Like, not even lying. My poor like product owner, she was like, Casey, like, I don't know when these things are gonna be due. What do we do? And I was looking at this and I was like, I have no idea what these mean. It was just a list of bullets of things that are supposed to be due next year. And I was like, these don't have any, well, I was like, there's no description. There's no link to the requirement document. There's a comment that's like, oh, so and so got an email about this on last year. What? What do you mean? Where's the email? What did they talk about?
Yeah, we get that too. And here's another thing that's kind of crazy. You know that it didn't just come straight from the person requesting. It went through like
Yeah.
3 or 4 people that never asked the
Well, there were
questions.
people
Like, what?
involved.
Nobody asked a
Nobody
question.
documented anything. But like, they don't know. They're just like, can anybody tell us what's happening? And everyone's just like, I don't know what's going on. It's like, write something down. Ask some questions. How is anybody supposed to develop anything against a one-line bullet? That stuff does not get put into our sprints, into our quarters, into our years. I'm like, get that out of here. You go figure out what this is supposed to be and get back to me. Or I'll go figure it out. You just let me know. Insane.
That's a paradigm that I think on the product owner side, or on the product management side, I think that's a paradigm that if we do one thing, we should start getting better at saying no. Like, okay, no, this needs more work, and then you can bring it back.
You could just say no. That's fine. I love saying no. There's this Instagram post. I'll have to send it to you, but this lady's just like, I love saying no. You could give it a little heck no for some razzle dazzle. And I'm like, that's me. Say no to drugs, say no to one-line requirements. There you go, kids. Okay, I have 100 more questions. Let's get to it. I'll be choosy in what I ask. Would you consider having users do co-creation with you on the other days if they were available?
We did have users.
Oh my God, you're killing me, dude. You're killing me. When you said day 2, 3, and 4, you don't have users there.
We didn't have this. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's confusing. On Monday and Friday are the SMEs, but the participants also.
You said the participants are the same thing as the team.
Yes.
Which is, the team is not users.
Yeah. We had 3 users on our team.
I'm so confused.
No, I probably didn't make it clear, but we had 3 users, actual users on our team.
What do you mean they're on your team? Are these users developing the application? Are they tip-tap typing away on a keyboard, writing their own application? What do you mean users are on your team?
No. They're the participants in the design sprint.
Oh my God. I feel like I'm in an Abbott and Costello skit. I must be like, what is happening?
So wait. Let me take it back a little bit. So the design sprint is not developing an application. We're not writing code.
Got it.
We're just for the first 3 days, we're all physical.
Got it. I understand what is happening each day. I kept asking you throughout this, who's involved, because I'm not following, because we're using a bunch of words that aren't real life words. We're using weird Google design sprint words that make no sense to me. When you say participants, when you say team, I don't know what that means. Like you have a team of people in your company building an application, and you have users, and you have stakeholders, and those are all different people. So who's in these sessions in each day?
I'll just say this one statement and you tell me what to call it. This group of people includes engineers, which are developers, product people, which are stakeholders, and users that use the product and service that we provide. All three.
And are all of those people you just listed there every single day?
Every day.
Okay.
Well, I called them participants, but if there's a better term, let me know.
So here's where I get messed up, right? When we say team, I assume that's the team doing like on the day to day, like people who work in your company. There is a team of people who, when all this design sprint stuff is done, the team still exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The team meets every day for daily scrums and they do all the things, right? So this is where my disconnect comes in because you're alternating between like team and participants. And I was assuming that that meant those are the same things and not users. And I also assume that the product people are on the team because product owners and managers are supposed to be part of like the actual core people building the thing.
Ooh, yeah, good point. I should have said this in the beginning. The design sprint team, the group of participants, are a collection of members of other teams for a temporary period of time. They're only there for a week.
So are the engineer people also potentially not on the same development team?
Yes. And in this case, they were not.
Oh, we've cracked the code, everyone. Oh my God. It only took us an hour and a half to figure it out.
Yeah. In this case, they were not, because in the beginning, when the facilitator is in conversation with the product manager, you want to know what the outcome of the design sprint is going to be and roughly where their focus attention is going to be. Like, is it going to be on a capability? Is it going to be on a new capability, existing one to improve it? What's it going to be? Because when you have members from the development teams come, you want to try to get members from the teams that this thing is going to end up going to, so they can bring all of this context back to their teams. So we did have our engineers were from those teams that were likely going to get this. Well, these MVIs are eventually going to come out of this.
A couple questions then, now that I think I finally, after an hour and a half of talking about this, understand. So 2 things. 1, the interviews the last day with the SMEs.
Yep. Users, SMEs, yep.
Are the same design sprint participants, the dev team people, and the users, like, are the users also listening in on the interviews?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're listening to their other fellow users.
That's fine.
And our engineers are listening to the users. Yeah.
Okay, let me cross this question off my list because now we finally figured out why I was confused the whole time. And then, so when you did your design sprint after dark thing and you said these other random people came in to the summary, those are other people who were not participating in this.
Correct. Who are not even in any of it, who just want to know what it's all about.
Like some of the outcomes. Okay, there's that. Mm-hmm. Now I'm following. And then what is the aftermath of this? Yeah, what's next? Like, what is follow-up, next steps? Who has to do what? What gets communicated? Yeah. When does development start? Yeah. And then that is my first question. The second one is, what's the quote-unquote maintenance of this? At what point do you do any revalidation? Do you continue to test this hypothesis? Do you do any of that after it gets deployed to production? Like, what is the full after portion of doing this?
Yeah, I'll only speak from where we are. This is the first time that we have done a design sprint in delivery. So there was all this questions about what is it? What does this mean for our delivery pipeline? All that stuff. So because of that, and also in our product organization, our customers, it's the first time they've done one with us. So I think some members of them have done one elsewhere. So we have to do a readout to tell the masses, this is what happened and this is the outcome. And this is why it was valuable. In between now and the readout, we're figuring out, I'm figuring out where this might fit in to our regular cadence of delivery, discovery and delivery. So like, how are we going to use this construct or some parts of this construct in our delivery pipeline and where. So we have to figure that out. And then in addition to all of that, we know we want to do a couple different design sprints at the same level. And then we're going to schedule those out. So one thing is keep the momentum going by doing the same thing for different, because we broke up our large end-to-end delivery into like 3 different phases. We did one of the phases. We're going to do the other 2 phases in 2 other design sprints at some point. And then where else are we going to incorporate the activities and outcomes from a design sprint in our delivery pipeline? Figure that out and do that. So that's
Well,
what
so
is
would
next.
you want, and maybe you don't want to specifically recommend or say anything at this point, but I can't believe I'm going to say this, but you know, in SAFe, how they have that like, oh my God, what is it? Like a milestone template. You know how they have that thing and it's like a like business
Yeah.
hypothesis thing,
Yeah.
but then you measure it afterwards to see if it worked. Because this is all a guess and it's all an experiment. You
Mhm.
think that you're doing this prototyping, you're verifying
Yeah.
assumptions, blah, 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 whatever. Once you actually deploy it, that's a whole different ballgame. Then, like, what are you doing after the deployment? Because I know you said, like, oh, how do we incorporate this in our usual cycles?
Yeah.
And is that conversation or those things that you're going to talk about going to include how are we going to measure it once it's deployed, you think?
Not as part of the design sprint. I want to make that
Well,
clear.
yeah, no, I know, but I mean, like, to say that you've done this design sprint, you've built the thing, and you have to test the thing, like, to me, that's like the closure of the whole cycle. I don't know, the whole experiment is done, and you get your results from the
Yeah.
experiment once it's out there for people to use, right? I mean, maybe I'm thinking about it wrong.
Yes. Yes. The external facilitator that came in, he did say that he hoped to build an experimentation culture, including the experiment is testing to see if your idea was it as valuable as you thought it was. And that's like after it's deployed too, you want to incorporate it then. I just happen to have been in the middle, or I am in the middle of building a culture of experimentation anyway. So this fits right in. As a separate effort, I'm trying to build in our habit of testing and verifying even after we deploy. Was it as valuable as we thought it was? We're good on the engineering part. We're really good at verifying and validating that each function works as designed and that operating at the levels that we want them to operate. We're weak at validating and verifying that value is actually being delivered and it is as valuable as we expected it to be. That part I'm trying to work on with the organization.
I want to see a study of how many places actually do that well because I've worked in some pretty high performing teams and I don't think any of my teams have ever really been good at that.
I haven't heard of one.
Yeah, I would love to see more of
Yeah,
that.
I hope our company's going to figure it out and that we're going to figure it out for us. And then once we do, because I'm confident that we're going to do that. Once we do, I'm hoping to like broadcast that out to the masses because everyone should be doing that. I've been in places where you can assign. We think this is higher priority. Like right now, we assign a numerical value on the value we think this is going to provide, and that's pretty cool. But that's meaningless until until you verify that, right? Because, like I was saying, the situation we were in, there were times when I'm hearing our engineers say, "We just worked for a couple of months on this MVI, and all of it is now out there, and no one's using it." Like, oh, well, then that means zero, right? That means zero value
Yeah,
has been
that opens
delivered.
like a big can of worms for me though, because I feel like I have been on programs where something is new and people aren't used to it and it's more about a
Yeah.
bigger cultural change
Hmm.
versus the like it's not useful or it is useful. But anyway, well, let's not get into that. I have two more questions.
Hmm.
Well, one question and one request, and I'm totally going to put you on the spot. So sorry. And if you want to not do that, we can also just not do that. But so I think I sort of teased this question with you a while ago when you first started doing this is this feels very user front end UI UX focused.
Hmm.
Is this something that you could do or modify to do with something that is a back end only type system? That maybe just connects
Ooh,
with
good
other
question.
systems. Like it's like users, quote unquote, or other consuming or connected systems.
I did think about that. We have a couple of teams that are I'll call support teams. They're the infrastructure teams, and they are the backbones, right? They're the backbone teams. And I was thinking about them and how this could be applied to that. And that's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking representatives from the development teams who own systems that interact with those backbone teams could be in on the design sprint, or the users that come in on day five. And I think you could use this for that as well, because you would pitch to other teams that use your capability. You could say, hey, this is what we think it's going to do. Is this in fact actually valuable to your team? And then they could give you feedback saying, no, if you change the API, we're going to have to do a whole lot of work, and it's working just fine now. Don't change the API, but introduce new or
Yeah, I
something. I don't know.
wonder how that would look in terms of even like the conversations, and I think the facilitation would need to probably look different.
I don't know. I haven't,
I
yeah,
worked on
it's
I worked
interesting.
on an application really early on that was more related to data flowing through multiple like parts of a system. And so
Yeah.
each of those parts was kind of its own thing with its own code base. It had its own purpose of processing.
Hmm.
And so I always think about that because that was one of the few teams that I'd worked on that was purely just back end. But then I also think about like one of my
Yeah.
friends, he worked on teams that were purely networking teams. And so could it be used for those types of things? Like, I don't know. I'm just genuinely asking because,
Networking. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
well,
I want
it's
to say
funny because
yes,
he
but
would
I don't know
always talk
yet.
to me about, because he would talk to me about how they tried to use Agile and Scrum and different things like that. I think about him in like those teams that are, let's say, network engineering teams, or you have these like data processing teams, or just, I don't know. I'm sure lots of people work on applications that don't have a UI. And so
Hmm.
could this be used for that? I don't know.
Hmm.
We don't have all the answers. Okay, so
No,
my
we don't.
last request before we wrap up, and I'm totally putting you on the spot, so feel free to think about it or also be like, ew, no, I'm not doing that. Is if you were to talk directly to, let's say, a product manager or stakeholder or like customer or whatever client to tell them why they should do this, what would you tell them? Speak directly to them. What would you say?
I would start with a question because I don't know, maybe they don't need it. Like to your point earlier, if you're doing all of these things as part of your natural end-to-end flow from ideation through ready for development,
Okay,
then
pause.
you don't
Let me
need
change my
something like
question.
this.
For people who are listening to the podcast who want to do this and believe that this would be helpful for them, what words would you say that they can use to convince people that they should do this?
Well, that's a tough one. I'll give it a shot, but I would need more time to refine this thing. But it would be something like right off the cuff. I'm just going to keep it as simple as possible, and that would be. So wait, first, what's the purpose? Is it to convince them that they want to do it, or that they need to know the words
Tell
to
their
tell their
bosses. Tell their
bosses
bosses. How
to
do you
convince them
like if
that we
I
should
were
do
to
this
go
thing?
to my people and
Okay.
be like, "Hey, we should do this because like our stuff is
Hmm.
terrible." Like how can I convince people that are like
Yeah.
above me or above my pay grade that this is worthwhile?
Yeah. So it's gonna be a multi-part story. The first part of it is explaining the current situation, and that is exactly what we did earlier. And you can say, okay, currently we have these instances where development teams are getting one-liners or just a couple of bullets, and then we have to either spend time, a considerable amount of time, engineers doing product discovery, or we have to send it back, and there's these delays, and outline all of the issues that you're having. And then other things like we have to do rework because we started to get into something and then we found out later through information that it's not going to be usable by the users. And then we also have instances where we deploy something after working on it for several sprints, and it's never used because that's the first time the users saw it, and they didn't it was foreign to them and they didn't like it or whatever reason. Design sprints are designed to get the right people into the room all at once to develop the idea and refine the idea, validate it with the actual users who are going to benefit from it, and then we're at the end of the design sprint, We're going to have a prototype of what we intend to build that has been validated by a number of users, up to 5 users, who gave feedback that that's the right thing to build. That's why we should have this, because it dramatically reduces the risk of failed deployments. And by failed deployment, like if we deploy something and they don't use it, that's a failed deployment in my eyes. And what it does is it increases the confidence in the user community that what we develop is impactful. So that's what I would say.
As you know, I'm a little bit skeptical over here. And I'm still not totally sold. But I think if I could restate what I think I heard you said as to how to help convince people to do this, is state the issues with the current process, situation, application. Explain the benefits of a design sprint, such as higher success rates of feature usage is a big one. I would add that
user adoption, feature usage.
Yep, user adoption. And I would even argue that that winds up saving money and resources for rework, because you know you're building the right thing the first time. I was just trying to, because I know you said a lot of things, and again, I put you on the spot, so I feel bad. So those are some of the things I think I heard you said. So if people want to go try this out, I do think that this is good. Yeah. I know I've been very mean and cynical the whole time, and I am still suspicious. I feel like we should be thinking about ways to bake this in a little bit more naturally. However, I do think that focusing on these things is good. And if this is a way to get your teams to do that, I think that's great. So, yeah, do you have some resources or different things that we can link in the caption for people if they're interested in learning more?
I certainly do.
Okay, well, we will link some resources in the caption provided by John, but we'll link those in the caption. So if you have an interest in maybe learning more on your own, those will be there. And then even if you still have questions like me, I didn't even get through all the ones on my list, I don't think. So if you have questions too,
naturally,
if you have questions, feel free to reach out. John will be answering all of them because I don't really do anything around here. But do feel free to reach out if you have questions, or even if you're thinking about maybe doing it on some of your teams and you want more information, don't hesitate. We would love to hear from you. So, okay, were there any final thoughts from you? Are you ready to wrap this up?
Well, my final thoughts. Okay, so here are my final thoughts. One, if you're potentially thinking about facilitating one of these things or trying to put it on, they can go wrong. Because if you don't have the right participants, if you don't have users in there as a participant in the design sprint, there's some folks from product, a UI person or UX person, and engineers in there, it's going to be less valuable. If you don't have the right users in there to test the idea and to test the prototype, it's probably not going to be as valuable. It's worth it to, in my opinion, it's worth it to wait until you have the right people in the room. That's critical, to get the right people in the room. And I would say don't don't underestimate the vast amount of coordination that's needed to pull one of these off. It can get pretty complicated. Like especially if you're in like a complicated building like we are in. It's only certain people have access to our floor, and you have to coordinate, like give instructions on how they need to get in and stuff. And users would come up and then they would get off on one floor, but it's not quite the right floor. But then that's just another story. So coordination is important. So those are my final thoughts.
Okay, amazing. We did it. We got through me being confused. What more could we ask for?
And I also snuck in a pun. I don't know if you caught it there. I snuck in a pun.
What did you do? What did you say?
Getting off on the wrong floor, but that's another story.
I
get it.
I heard you say that and I was confused. I was like, what is he talking about? And I just didn't say anything because I was like, I don't know, maybe he's confused.
It was a stretch.
It was something. I definitely didn't get that at all.
It's trying to keep you on your toes.
My mom told me a joke that apparently all her friends, like think is really funny, and I'm going to tell it to you and you can decide whether you think it's funny. It's, what do you call a dog who also meows?
Cat dog? Wait, I don't know.
Bilingual.
Oh,
That's the most unfunny joke I've ever heard in my
ugh,
whole life after the one that you just told.
that's so disappointing. Oh, after that one. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. No
Yeah.
offense
Like
taken, I
yours
guess.
is worse for sure. That joke is so bad. And my mom was like, oh my God, everyone I told thought this was so funny. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Bilingual? What do you mean?
I think it's pretty clear.
Anyway. Okay, well, on that note, everybody, thank you for listening. Follow us on Instagram at the Agile Commute. Listen to us on any streaming platform, podcast platform available. If you want to have more in-depth conversations with us, like we mentioned, if you want to talk about design sprints or you have topics that you want us to talk about, feel free to DM us, email us. Our email is theagilecommute@gmail.com. Like, subscribe, comment, reach out, and see you guys next time. Thanks so much.
Yeah.